101 Making move. I watched Rob walk down the street. His back hunched slightly, but his presence was still sharp. Soon, he faded into the distance. But his words remained in my mind, lingering like a stain I couldn't quite scrub out. Doesn't matter what kind of man he was. You had no right to play God. That was what he said to me. I scoffed under my breath. And what did he know? If anyone in this world had the right to play God, it was me. Who else knew of the grim future that awaited this world? Who else had the power to defy the will of the heavens and carve a new path in stone? Who else held humanity's destiny in their grasp? Not him, not anyone. Every single person in this world dangled from the strings tied to my fingers, all blissfully unaware of their own powerlessness as they moved to serve my whims. They were all puppets, and their lives depended on my decisions. Each choice I made was consequential enough to shake the entire course of this story. If I so desired, I could kill all the main characters. And if I did that, nothing, no divine intervention, no cosmic balance, not even fate itself, could stop the Spirit King's rise. This world would be doomed. So, by allowing the heroes to live, I was, in a way, granting this world permission to persist. Read new chapters at my virtual library empire. That was the power I held. The power to dictate the shape of this story. The power worthy of a god. I let out a slow breath and shook my head. Never mind. It didn't matter what that old man thought. It didn't matter what anyone thought of me. The end of this arc had begun. It was time to make my move. My gaze drifted back to the children. The game they were playing had restarted. One of the other boys was now playing the role of the knight with a wooden sword in hand. Meanwhile, the other kids scattered around him like beasts, giggling and shrieking. And then, my eyes found her. The girl from earlier. She was laughing innocently like children often do, her braids bouncing behind her as she ran, and her green eyes gleaming with delight. So carefree, so unaware. I bent down, pretending to tie my shoelace. Behind me, unseen by the children or anyone else on the street, my origin card manifested. A luminous golden glow flickered briefly before blending into the afternoon light. I lowered my hand to the ground. The moment my fingertips made contact with the road, a faint pulse of energy rippled outward. The very matter beneath my touch stirred, eager to yield to my command. And so, I willed it. As a result, the earth shifted under that girl's foot, just slightly, just enough. She was running as the ground below her turned soft for a moment. Her next step landed wrong. She tripped. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as she hit the pavement, her small hands scraping against the rough surface, her knee slamming down hard. For a moment, everything went still. Then came the tears. She sniffled, her breath hitching as she pushed herself up on trembling little arms. Blood welled up from the scrape on her knee, looking all the more red against her pale skin. The other children froze as well. Their laughter died. Then, panic set in. One of the boys rushed to her side, his face tight with concern. "Are you okay?" She bit her lip, trying, and failing, to hold back more tears. A soft whimper escaped her. "It hurts." Another boy, the one who was pretending to be the knight this time, spoke in frantic urgency. "We need to take her to Sister Alvara. She'll know what to do." The others nodded in quick agreement. "Can you get up, Tiz?" the other girl in the group asked. Tiz, the injured girl, shook her head as tears started spilling freely down her cheeks now. "And no," she whispered. I leaned back against the bench, watching them with mild interest. It was fascinating. Her pain was temporary. It was a minor injury, barely worth a second thought. She would be fine in a few hours. And yet, her friends acted as if she had been struck down by a blade. How delicate they all were. How fragile. When I was their age, my clan's martial arts instructor used to make me punch scorching hot sand to toughen my knuckles. If I so much as winced, he'd call my sister over just so she could mock me. Honestly, that hurt more than the damn sand. I exhaled, letting a quiet chuckle escape me. Shaking my head, I rose from the bench and walked toward them. The children stiffened when they saw me approach. I kept my expression calm and knelt before the girl. She hiccuped, valiantly trying to stifle her sobs now that she realized a stranger, a grown-up, no less, was watching. I offered her the most amicable smile I could muster and extended my hand. "Here," I said gently. "Let me help you. Can you tell me your name and where your home is?" Sister Alvara walked through the quiet streets, feeling the cool evening breeze against her skin. The lamps lining the road flickered softly from time to time, and the air was heavy with the scent of approaching rain. It had been a long day. Managing the church was never easy, especially when half the clergy seemed incapable of handling even the simplest matters without her guidance. The high priest was wise, but he had been going out way too often these days. While she was a bit curious to know where an overly religious person like the high priest was spending his time, she also didn't want to intrude. So, she kept her quiet and did her job. And between overseeing prayers, organizing alms, and keeping the faithful from tearing each other apart over minor theological disputes, she was exhausted. Still, it was a fulfilling life. She exhaled, rolling her shoulders as her house came into view. It was a modest home between the towering structures of the church district. But the moment she saw the warm glow spilling from the window, she froze. She was certain she hadn't left the lights on. 1,000 possibilities ran through her mind. Had someone broken in? Had Tiz come home early and forgotten to put the lights out? Because usually, by this time she'd be taking her evening nap. Had something else happened? A sudden sense of unease coiled in her chest. She hurried forward. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her satchel as she reached for the door. It wasn't locked. Slowly, she pushed it open. And the very first thing that greeted her was the scent of food, warm and savory and spicy. Something had been cooked. Then, she heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter. Tiz laughter. Her brows furrowed as she stepped inside. The sight before her made her pause. At the small dining table in the room next to the lobby sat her little sister. There was a half-eaten plate of food in front of her. And sitting across from her, with the casual ease of someone who belonged there, was a boy who seemed to be in his late teens. He had black hair and matching dark eyes, albeit there was a tint of gold to them. The boy looked normal in every regard, just another face you'd see walking down the street and forget. However, there was an air of aristocracy around him. His posture was too confident, and his presence too magnetic. He was leaning forward, resting his chin on his hand as he listened to Tiz excitedly ramble about something with a faint smirk playing on his lips. Tiz, completely unbothered by the presence of a man who should not be here, continued. Her hands waved animatedly as she spoke. And then Tommy said that knights can't beat dragons without magic, but that's stupid, right? Because magic doesn't exist. And a really strong knight could totally. She stopped mid-sentence when she finally noticed her big sister standing there. Alvi, she chirped, beaming. You're home. The eyes flicked toward her, his smirk widening just a fraction. And it was then Alvaro remembered him. He was the same boy who visited her church a few days ago. The same boy with whom she debated about the concept of faith and. Alvaro didn't move. Her mind was still processing the scene in front of her. Slowly, her gaze shifted to Tiz, noticing a bandage on her knee. Tiz, she said, rushing up to her. You were hurt. Tiz nodded, a little sheepish. Tripped while playing. But Mr. Samael helped. He found me and brought me home. He even made dinner. Alvara's eyes snapped back to the boy. He gave a smile that would have been charming under different circumstances. It wasn't a big deal. Alvara didn't know what to say. She took a deep breath and smoothened her expression before stepping further into the room. Her little beamed at her from the table. Tiz, Alvara said, keeping her tone gentle. Can you explain why we have a guest? Tiz perked up. Oh, he brought me home 'cause I couldn't walk properly, Alvi. And then I asked him to stay for dinner. He made the food, too. Alvara's brows rose. He made dinner. Uh-huh. Tiz nodded enthusiastically. His stew is so good. You should try it. The boy, Samael, spoke again. His voice was smooth and gentle, not callous and cold like she heard the other day. Your sister was insistent, he said. I didn't want to intrude, but she's quite persuasive. Tiz giggled, clearly pleased with herself. Alvara folded her arms, regarding Samael for a moment. His demeanor was calm, respectful even. It was completely different from when they last talked. Still, she couldn't exactly fault him for helping her sister, nor could she ignore the fact that Tiz had invited him in. Well, Alvara said after a pause, it seems I don't have much choice now, do I? She gave Tiz a faint smile. But next time, you ask me before inviting someone inside, understood? Yes, Alvi, Tiz said, a little sheepishly, though her grin didn't fade. Alvara turned to Samael. Thank you for helping my sister. It seems I owe you some gratitude. It was no trouble, he replied with an easy shrug. I happened to be in the area and couldn't leave her there. The food was just a small way to repay her kindness for letting me stay until you returned. Alvara nodded slowly. I see. She set her satchel down by the door and walked toward the table, glancing at the plates. The smell of the meal was enticing, though she was too wary to fully appreciate it. Please, Samael said, gesturing toward the empty chair. Join us. There's plenty left. For a moment, Alvara hesitated. She looked at Tiz, whose eyes sparkled with excitement, and then back at Samael. Reluctantly, she sat down. The tension in her chest didn't ease, but she forced herself to smile for Tiz's sake. All right, she said, but I'll handle the dishes. Samael chuckled softly. Fair enough. And as the meal continued, Tiz chattered on about her day. Her energy was boundless despite her earlier injury. Samael listened attentively, occasionally chiming in with a question or a comment that made the little girl laugh. Alvara watched him carefully, trying to gauge his intentions. He was polite, intelligent, and unerringly composed, but there was something just beneath the surface, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Still, she reminded herself, he had helped Tiz, and Tiz also seemed to like him very much, which was strange because she'd always been wary of strangers. Usually, it took weeks, months, even, for Tiz to warm up to anyone new. She'd cling to Alvara's side and only offer shy nods or whispers when spoken to. But she seemed so comfortable with this boy. So, for now, Alvara decided to drop her guard a bit. She joined her hands, prayed to the goddess for providing the food, and started eating. 102. The dinner was over, and while Alvara hadn't said it aloud, she truly enjoyed the food. Whoever this boy was, he certainly knew his way around the kitchen. But Tiz, on the other hand, had barely finished her plate before she started getting sleepy. She valiantly tried to stay awake during the meal, but by the time Alvara tucked her in and told her a bedtime story, her little sister was out cold. For a few moments, Alvara kept sitting beside Tiz, watching her sleep peacefully. Then, with a quiet sigh, she rose and left the room, closing the door softly behind her. When she returned to the dining room, Samael was still there. He was sitting with his back straight and his hands resting lightly on the table. His expression was calm but attentive. He looked up as Alvara entered. She's asleep, he asked in a hushed voice. Alvara nodded as she took the seat across from him. She was exhausted. It didn't take much to put her to bed. She's a lively one, Samael said with a faint smile. Talks a lot for someone so small. Alvara chuckled softly. She gets that from our mother. Though sometimes, I think Tiz could outtalk even her. Samael smiled softly. I remember you telling me you had a little brother. Alvara's expression turned stiff for just a moment before returning to normal. Yes, he's away on a school trip. Samael nodded understandably. That reminds me, Alvara said, breaking the silence, you've been nothing but polite, and you've even cooked dinner. But I think it's time you told me who you really are. You're clearly not from around here. Samael leaned back slightly, meeting her gaze without hesitation. You're right, I'm not from here, I'm from the academy. Alvara frowned. Which academy? The academy, Samael emphasized. Apex Institute for the Awakened. Alvara's eyes shot wide as he continued. I'm a first-year hunter in training, he said. I'm sent here by the academy to investigate the recent spirit beast sightings and attacks in this region. Alvara froze for a second, her breath catching in her throat. Do you have any proof of your role? Something to show you're really from the academy? Without a word, Samael reached into his coat and took out a golden badge. The unmistakable crest of the Apex Academy glinted faintly under the room's soft lamplight. Meticulously engraved below the crest was his name. Of course, only his first name. Alvara took it and examined it carefully. Her eyes scanned the details before she let out a quiet sigh of relief. It's real, she murmured, handing it back. I understand your caution, Samael said as he pocketed the badge. These are dangerous times, especially for a region like this. Alvara nodded. Her voice was heavy with concern. We've already lost so many. Families were torn apart, homes were burned, the attacks have shaken everyone. I don't know how much more people can take. I'm sorry, Samael said quietly. I've seen the aftermath of attacks. I understand how horrific it must have all been. She studied him for a moment. His sincerity was evident in his expression. Finally, she sighed. Is there anything I can do to help? Yes, actually, Samael said, his tone shifting slightly. I need to speak with the high priest. He might have information that could aid the investigation. Alvara's brows knitted in hesitation. The high priest. She shook her head. I'm afraid that won't be possible, not in the short term, at least. Why not? Samael asked, leaning forward slightly. The high priest. Alvara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He hasn't been in the church much lately. He's preoccupied, and even when he is around, his schedule is tightly controlled. Setting up a meeting could take weeks. Samael frowned, but nodded. What about the archbishop, or another high-ranking member of the clergy? Alvara's expression grew firmer. I'm sorry, Samael, but that's not an option either. The church has to tread carefully when it comes to matters like this. There's been tension between the central monarch and the local government recently. If the church is seen as taking sides or interfering, it could jeopardize our ability to serve the people. So you're saying the church can't help? Samael asked. We want to help, Alvara said earnestly. But not in a way that risks inflaming political tensions or alienating the very people we're here to support. I hope you can understand that. Samael leaned back in his chair. His posture was unnervingly still as he weighed her words. And when he spoke again, his voice was edged with solemnity. You didn't ask why I got so angry when you questioned me about faith, Sister Alvara. Alvara blinked, caught off guard. I didn't. Samael's lips curled into a humorless smile. You see, sister, my mother was a devout follower of the Mother of Mercy. To her, faith wasn't just a belief, it was her reason for living. She dedicated her entire life to her religion. He paused for a moment. I was raised in that same faith. The church, the goddess, they were the foundation of everything. But when I turned 6, I fell ill. Have you heard of essence poisoning? Alvara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had indeed heard of it. The world was saturated with spirit essence, and for the awakened ones, it was a boon. But in rare cases, young children developed a condition where the very essence in the air poisoned them. There was no cure. Healers, who used essence to fuel their powers, would only worsen the child's condition if they tried to heal them. Discover hidden content at my virtual library empire. No medicine, no enchanted artifacts, no alchemy, nothing could help. It was a slow, agonizing death. It was like cancer, back when cancer was still untreatable. Some children survived, others did not. Alvara was silent for a long moment, unsure how to respond. Finally, she found her voice. What happened? My mother was one of the best healers in the land, Samael resumed. But even she couldn't cure me. The condition is untreatable, as you know. And a few months before my 7th birthday, I was on the verge of death. Everyone was sure I wouldn't make it. And I didn't. A long, stunned silence fell between them. Alvara stared at him, unable to find any words to fill the space. After a beat, she whispered, Why you didn't? Samael nodded slowly. My heart stopped for 2 full minutes. I was declared dead. But my mother, he exhaled. Through sheer stubbornness, my mother refused to accept it. She performed a miracle that night and brought me back. No one could believe it. There are powers that could reanimate the dead, but not like this. My mother, she actually brought me back to life. That's impossible, Alvara murmured, her disbelief clear. It would have been if it were a miracle, as I said, Samael replied in a flat tone. But it wasn't. My mother gave her own life to save mine. She transferred her life force into me. When I opened my eyes again, I was cured. But she was gone. She wasn't there to see it. Alvara lowered her gaze with a heavy heart. I'm so sorry. It's fine, Samael said dismissively. I was devastated, of course. I was hurt, but it left me with questions. If the gods are so merciful, if the heavens are so good, why didn't they save her? Why did she have to die? If it was a punishment for bringing me back, for defying the will of the heavens, then the gods aren't good. They are cruel. From that day, I decided to abandon my faith. His words hung in the air. Alvara opened her mouth to speak but found herself at a loss. How could she respond to such a confession? Samael took another slow breath, continuing as though he needed to finish this part of the story. And when I came to Kandera, and saw the destruction wrought by the spirit beasts, the fear, the helplessness, the same cruelty was staring me in the face again. So, I lashed out at you. Alvara listened quietly, feeling the depth of his pain. His fractured faith, his anger, it all made sense now. Her voice softened, and there was a hint of understanding in her words. I can understand your frustration, Samael. But, once again, Samael cut her off. His voice was firm but not unkind. I'm not expecting a miracle, sister. I know that won't happen. What I'm asking, though, is that you help me. Not as a member of the church, but as a fellow human. Help these people here. Alvara sighed, rubbing her temples. Look, even if I tried to arrange a meeting with the high priest or the archbishop, they'd dismiss it the moment they hear you're from the academy. They won't engage with that. And honestly, I don't think they know anything worth hearing. I'm not asking for politics, sister, Samael said, shaking his head. I just want answers. If they don't have them, then fine. I just want to ask them. I need to speak with them. Alvira hesitated. She could see the earnestness in his eyes, but she also knew the complexity of what he was asking. She glanced around the room as her mind raced. Finally, after a long pause, she nodded. All right, I'll take you to the church. Meet me tomorrow morning, before the 8th bell. I'll do what I can. Samael's expression softened, and a brief smile touched his lips. Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me. Alvira could have sworn there was something else hidden in his gaze, something calculating. But before she could think about it, the moment was gone. Perhaps it was nothing more than her imagination. 103. The air was sharp with morning chill as I made my way toward the cathedral, my boots clicking softly against the pavement. The streets were quiet at this hour as the city was still rubbing the sleep from its eyes. Mist curled around the edges of the buildings, reluctant to dissipate under the faint touch of dawn. I pulled my coat tighter, tucking my hands into its pockets and kept walking. The spires of the cathedral came into view soon. Even in the muted light, the building held an aura of reverence. It was perhaps the oldest building in the city, yet it stood as if untouched by time. And there she was, Alvira. She stood at the base of the steps, her gray cloak hanging loose around her shoulders, the edges flowing in the faint breeze. She looked up as I approached, and her expression turned unreadable. You're early, I said, breaking the silence. My voice sounded louder than I intended against the quiet morning. I said before the 8th bell, she replied, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. I thought you might need directions. I gave a small smile. You underestimate me, sister. And you overestimate yourself, she shot back, though there was no venom in her tone. For a moment, we simply stood there and let the stillness stretch between us. I glanced at the cathedral doors. Much like the rest of the building, the heavy wooden doors were also carved with texts from the Holy Scriptures and the intricate depictions of the Mother of Mercy. Once again, thank you so much for trying to help me with this, sister. You have no idea how valuable your support is, I said with as much sincerity I could muster. She tried to offer a smile but failed. Thank me when I can get them to talk to you. Now, follow me. She turned and began climbing the stairs. I followed, the sound of my boots echoing faintly against the stone steps. Inside, the cathedral was the same as the last time when I was here, albeit a little colder. The air was heavy with the faint scent of incense, and the flicker of candlelight cast shifting shadows across the high, vaulted ceilings. Rows of pews stretched out before us. Most of them were empty save for a few early worshippers lost in quiet prayer. Alvira led the way down the center aisle, her footsteps barely audible on the polished floor. I noticed how her shoulders tensed as we approached the altar, where the grand statue of the Mother of Mercy towered above us. The statue was made entirely from white stone which resembled marble in texture. The goddess was portrayed holding a khopesh in one hand and a lantern in the other. Her upper face was obscured by a hood, revealing only the curve of her smile. It was a haunting statue, truly befitting of a goddess of death. Sister Alvira kept walking and led me toward a side door near the altar. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow hallway. This way, she said, her tone clipped. Explore more at my virtual library empire. I followed without a word. The air in the hallway was cool, carrying the scent of polished wood and old stone. The faint echo of our footsteps filled the quiet. And after a short walk, the passage opened into a circular antechamber bathed in a warm golden light. The chamber was spacious, its marble walls polished to a sheen that reflected the glow of a chandelier hanging low from the ceiling. There were high bookshelves lining the walls here and there, and a small oak table in the middle with cushioned seats around it. At the far end of the chamber, a spiral staircase led to the upper floors. The staircase was guarded by 2 sentinels. They were clad in dark armor that seemed to drink in the light. Sleek machine guns were slung across their chests, and curved swords rested at their sides. They weren't ordinary guards. They were enforcers, the clergy's hand-picked guardians, trained to eliminate threats without hesitation. But it wasn't their presence that unsettled me. In fact, I was fairly certain I could deal with them in a fight. Because while they seemed to be armed with enchanted artifacts, these guards were not awakened. So, what truly unsettled me in this place, was the runes. Carved deep into the floor in front of the guards was a long string of glowing cyan symbols, pulsing faintly. Just one look at those runes and my instincts clawed at the edges of my mind, screaming at me to stop, to turn back. Whatever force those runes held wasn't meant for someone like me. And that was indeed true. I knew what it was. Those runes were used to create wards, a deadly safeguard. If anyone under S rank dared to cross that line without authorization, they'd be paralyzed on the spot. This was why I needed Sister Alvira. Without her or someone else authorized by the church, I'd never make it through. Yes, my purpose for coming here wasn't to ask questions from the clergy. No, I had an entirely different goal. Alvira strode ahead without hesitation, her dark cloak flowing behind her as she approached the guards. I hesitated, staring at the glowing runes for a moment before following behind her. The guards stiffened as we drew closer, their hands drifting toward their weapons. One of them, a tall figure with a heavy voice, spoke first. "Who is that with you, sister?" "A guest," she replied smoothly. "I'm escorting him to the high priest." The guard's helmet tilted slightly as his gaze bore into me. After a few heartbeats, the other guard gave a brief nod. "Proceed." Quickly, Alvira stepped forward without any hesitation, crossing the threshold of the runes as if they did not exist at all. When it was my turn to cross, the runes dimmed and soon their light faded entirely. I stepped over them, and as soon as I did, the runes flared back to life, glowing in that eerie cyan hue once again. I followed Sister Alvira up the stairs as we entered another hallway. We walked straight for a while before taking a sharp turn into a narrow passage. Soon, we made another turn and exited into a hallway that looked similar to the previous one. This place was like a maze. Every corridor was indistinguishable from the last. Before reaching the high priest's chamber, we had to make several more turns, climb another spiral staircase, and pass through 3 sets of guards stationed at various checkpoints. Finally, we arrived. The high priest's chamber looked different from the rest of the cathedral's design. Unlike the other doors, which were made of wood or stone, this one was constructed from titanium and reinforced alloys. A scanner was embedded in the wall to the right of the door, and 2 more guards flanked the entrance. However, unlike the other guards, these ones were less heavily armed. Alvira stopped and turned to me. "Wait here," I nodded, stepping aside to let her approach the door. The guards didn't question her at all. Instead, one of them took a card from a pouch on his belt and pressed it against the scanner. The device emitted a soft beeping sound as the heavy titanium door unlocked. Alvira gave me a brief glance before walking into the room. The door closed behind her, leaving me alone with the guards. I immediately began tapping my foot, trying to look impatient as the seconds dragged on. A minute passed, and Sister Alvira still hadn't come out. I had no idea how long it would take for her to speak with the high priest. So, I couldn't afford to wait anymore. I had to act. Now, taking a deep breath, I put on my best irritated expression and whined, "How much longer do they expect me to wait?" Then, without warning, I took a bold step toward the door. The guards reacted instantly. The closest one moved forward, placing a firm hand against my chest to stop me. "Sir, just wait here," he said, his tone calm but authoritative. "Huh," I snarled, baring my teeth like a spoiled brat. "Do you even know who I am, you insolent peasant? How dare you touch me?" I slapped his hand away and moved into his personal space, trying to get to the door. The guard had no choice but to grab my shoulders and shove me back with more force. I staggered, nearly colliding with the wall behind me. I coughed for dramatic effect and clutched my chest. How dare you, you bastard. Over. Your life is over. The moment I tell my father about this insult, he'll have you executed. Without waiting for a reply, I spun on my heel and stormed off. Wait. Hey, Sister Alvira told you to stay here. The guard called out, his voice tinged with panic. "I'm going to my father," I shouted without looking back. "You can tell Sister Alvira I don't need her help anymore because you assaulted me." I didn't assault you." The guard shouted and started running after me. "And you can't just wander around. Hey, stop." I also started running and made a sharp turn into another corridor. "Wait until my father hears about this. My clan will end you. They'll end you," I yelled, keeping up my entitled act. Thankfully, I'd memorized the layout of this floor while following Alvira. Hearing the guard's hurried footsteps growing louder behind me, I made another turn and spotted a maintenance closet to my left. The guard hadn't turned the corner yet, so he couldn't see me. I tried to summon my origin card instinctively. But nothing happened. Ah, right, those wards had another feature. They could also suppress an awaken's ability to summon or dismiss cards from their soul arsenal. That meant I couldn't use my origin card either. Fortunately, I had been prepared for this. "Fine," I muttered under my breath and dropped to one knee. Then, I took out a hairpin from my pocket, one I'd bent into a makeshift lockpick earlier, and got to work on the door. I twisted and turned the pin, trying to listen for the telltale click of the lock releasing. But once again, nothing happened. Okay, so maybe I wasn't an expert, but I knew how to pick simple locks. I had learned in my past life, as a hobby, of course. So why wasn't this working? The guard's footsteps grew louder. He was close now, seconds away from rounding the corner and catching me. I debated my options. What should I do? Should I knock him out? Take his uniform and disguise myself as him? But what would I do with the body? Throw it out a window? Too risky. I couldn't afford to get caught. Not yet. I was still brainstorming when a thought struck me. Frowning, I placed my hand on the doorknob and turned it. Click. Wow. Right. So, this door was already unlocked. Maybe the janitor forgot to lock it. For a moment, I just stared at the door, my face deadpan. Then I coughed awkwardly and slipped inside, locking it behind me just as the guard rounded the corner. Hey, where did you go? Hey, man, why'd I always have to deal with brats? I held my breath, listening intently as the guard's boots thudded past. He scanned the hallway briefly before running down the hallway and taking another turn. I waited until the sound of his footsteps faded entirely. Hey, I scoffed under my breath, leaning back against a broom. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out an item and inspected it. It was a slim, blue keycard with a tiny chip in it. The same keycard the guard had used to unlock the High Priest's chamber earlier. During our little scuffle, I slipped it out from his pouch and put it in my pocket with a simple sleight of hand. Now, all I had to do was wait for nightfall. 104. The guard tried to search for me for a few more minutes, but I was nowhere to be found. Eventually, he gave up and returned to his post, thinking I had really gone home to complain to my father. But I was right there, just a few corridors past the High Priest's room, hiding in the maintenance closet, waiting for nightfall. Soon, night fell. The cathedral descended into silence as the last echoes of evening prayers faded. Everyone left the building, including the guards. My guess was that only the enforcers were still guarding the checkpoints on the floors, but aside from them, there was no one else in the building. By now, my legs ached from being folded into such a cramped space for so long. Still, I did not open the door. I did not come out. Not yet. Vigilance demanded patience. I had only one chance at this. I wanted to be absolutely sure that I wouldn't be caught. Find your next read at my virtual library empire. So, I waited a few more hours. Only when it was midnight, and the moon was at the zenith of the starry black sky, did I decide to come out. I eased the door open and stepped out of the maintenance closet. The mop behind me almost fell from my movement, but I caught it before it made any noise and shut the door quietly behind me. The corridor was bathed in the pale moonlight pouring in from the arched windows. It wasn't dark, but it wasn't exactly bright either. Pressing myself against the wall and staying away from the windows, I started walking. The High Priest's chamber was just a few turns away. It didn't even take me a minute to reach it. I glanced at the heavy titanium door for a moment before taking out the keycard I had stolen from the guard earlier. As soon as I placed the keycard on the scanner, it made a beeping noise that sounded louder in the night's quiet than it was supposed to be, and the locking mechanism in the titanium door clicked open. I smirked. Okay, so far, so good. Nodding to myself, I slipped inside the room. It wasn't anything extraordinary. It was just a plain and unremarkable office. Framed landscapes and photographs of the High Priest contributing to or attending various city events adorned the walls. A lush carpet, woven from the finest wool and silk, blanketed the floor. At the far end of the room was a large desk, its polished wood reflecting the faint glow of moonlight falling in from the grand window behind it. The window offered picturesque view of the city. Stacks of papers sat neatly atop the desk. Tall shelves filled with books and tomes lined the walls. A pair of leather couches and a small round table sat in the center, completing the scene. As I said, it was just a plain office. But plain offices often hold the darkest secrets. And I wasn't here to just admire the decor. My eyes quickly scanned the entire room, taking note of anything of potential use. I moved to the desk first. The faint scent of incense clung to the wood, mixing with the sterile tang of polished surfaces. The desk's drawer was locked, naturally. But that wasn't a problem. I took out two thin metal hairpins from under my sleeve. Their tips were already bent to my liking. The truth is, picking locks is rarely complicated. It requires practiced skill, sure. But with the right tools and correct guidance, even a toddler can do it. The principle remains the same. If you learn how to open one lock, you'd quickly understand how to open the rest. Well, unless you're dealing with something like a scanner lock, in which case you're not picking, you're hacking. Or outright breaking. For standard locks, though, the method is simple. Take two thin metal wires, each bent at a slight angle. You'll use one as a tension wrench to apply the right pressure and the other as a pick to, well, pick the pins. Insert the wrench into the keyhole as a lever, turning it gently to create tension. Use the second wire to probe above it. Inside the locks, there are several pins. Most of the pins should move easily, except one. The one pin that resists is called the binding pin. Your job is to find that pin, push against it, and listen for the telltale click as it resets. Once that happens, another pin becomes the binding pin at random. You go back and forth to find that new binding pin and push against it. The process repeats until all the pins resets. A standard lock has 5 to 6 pins. High security locks can have more. Sometimes these pins could also be distributed across multiple cylinders. I'm oversimplifying the explanation here, of course. But that's the gist of it. This lock wasn't particularly sophisticated, as most desk locks aren't. Within seconds, I heard a satisfying click, and the top drawer slid open. Inside, I found many things: papers, contracts, ledgers, but not what I was looking for. What was I looking for? Evidence. I was looking for proof indicating that the High Priest was involved in the Spirit Beast attacks. In the game, Michael uncovered the truth after weeks of investigation. He found that the two most influential figures in the region, Overlord Everin and High Priest Bowden, were colluding to orchestrate the attacks. Together, they were unleashing spirit beasts upon the city, sowing terror into the hearts of the citizens of Condera. There wasn't a single culprit. It was a two-person operation. A two-person crime. But in the game, Michael was always late to unravel the full conspiracy. He'd either catch the High Priest first, allowing the Overlord to carry on with the attacks, or vice versa. It didn't matter what route was taken. In the end of this arc, thousands of people died. It was a ruthless massacre. But it took weeks for all that to happen. I didn't have the patience to wait around all that time. I had to accelerate the timeline. So I did just that. I pushed Michael in the right direction, well, sort of, and fastened his investigation process. And if I understood Michael as well as I thought I did, then he was already planning his next move. He was going to raid the Overlord mansion. Why? Wherever evidence he found about the Overlord up until now was all vague, even the forged documents I indirectly gave him. He'd need something concrete to persuade the Academy to intervene in this matter. So, he was going to raid the Overlord mansion. All according to plan, I muttered with a smirk, taking everything out of the drawer and spreading it across the desk. Then, I tapped the bottom of the drawer. A hollow sound echoed. It was a false bottom, a trick as old as time for hiding things you didn't want anyone to find. But old tricks are easy to spot. With extreme caution, I pried open the false bottom. I worked slowly, careful to not trigger any traps, but there were none. Under the false bottom, I found exactly what I was looking for. Things like money order records and vaguely worded contracts. All of it linked the High Priest to Overlord Everin either directly, or to several shady shell companies. I didn't stop there. I moved to the other drawers, finding more false bottoms and uncovering even more evidence like fund transfers, proof of illegal land acquisitions, and shipments labeled with ambiguous codes. This wasn't just evidence, it was a treasure trove. But all this alone still wouldn't be enough to put the High Priest behind bars. And that was fine. I wasn't looking for justice, anyway. I wanted resources. I wanted power. And when all of this was over, I'd have both. 105. After spending a few more minutes emptying the false bottoms of every drawer, I started inspecting the rest of the room, hoping to find something else of value. But nothing stood out, because as I said, it was just a plain office. Then I spotted the High Priest's laptop. It was a cheap, outdated model. Nothing fancy. It didn't even have a biometric scanner. Of course, it was still password protected. Naturally, I decided to open it and see if I could find something inside. I started guessing the most obvious passwords like, password, 123,456, even, QWERTY 1234. Nothing worked. Maybe his password was someone's birthday or another important event. Thinking that, I started typing in the marked dates from his desk calendar. Still no luck. I was about to give up. I had everything I already needed, after all. At this point, I only wanted to go through his laptop out of pure curiosity. On a whim, I typed the name of the church. And the screen unlocked. I shook my head. Amateur. Immediately, I started clicking through the folders. But just as I had expected, I didn't find anything of importance. There were no incriminating files, no sensitive data. Just the usual bland assortment of notes and spreadsheets. It was boring, but nothing unexpected. I wasn't surprised at all. Most people, even in this day and age, don't trust computers with their deepest secrets. Digital files can be hacked, copied, or stolen remotely. A thief doesn't even need to touch your device to siphon everything off a flash drive these days. On the other hand, stealing physical documents required more effort. You'd need to be physically present to steal them. As such, there was more risk, more trouble. Or, at least, that's how old people see it. Personally, I'd still put all my sensitive files online in a secure DigiLocker. Why? Because I'm lazy. And also because I believe that is safer. But let's get back to the topic. As I was saying, I didn't find anything noteworthy on his laptop. Well, except for one thing. His search history. When I opened his search history, I saw things I wish I hadn't. Things that made me reconsider the existence of life and free will. The things this man had looked up, well, I had seen less disturbing content in horror films. It was so bad, I thought about cleaning my eyes with holy water. After a minute of mental recovery, and desperately trying to unsee what I'd seen, I got back to the task at hand. I found the high priests and the overlord personal contact information. I was going to need this later. After that, I took pictures of all the important documents I'd found earlier. Then, I meticulously put everything back in its original place, just like how it all was. Satisfied, I exited the room and started planning my escape. The enforcers were still stationed at the checkpoints, even in the dead of night, which meant I'd have to take an unconventional route to get out of this building. Climbing down a window was the simplest option I could think of. It was risky, sure, but better than trying to sneak past guards. I found an office that didn't require a keycard to enter. Maybe it was a storage room, judging by the tall shelves overflowing with papers. It also had several windows, and one was large enough for me to climb through. I unlatched it, letting in the cool night air, and was halfway through when I remembered the keycard still in my pocket. Right, I took out the keycard and tossed it under a dusty cupboard where it would stay hidden. Then, I hoisted myself over the windowsill and started my slow descent. Thankfully, since it was still the middle of the night, the darkness outside worked in my favor. I was dressed all in black, making it even harder to spot me. But I was still 3 floors above the ground. Explore more adventures at my virtual library empire. Climbing down was going to be long and difficult. I wish I had a card that let me fly. By the time I climbed down, discreetly exited the church's vicinity, and took care of a few more things, it was late morning. Today marked our 8th day on this mission. If my prediction was correct, then by tomorrow, all of this would be over. For now, I needed a change of clothes, food, and some rest. I also needed to iron out a few details of my plan. So, I decided to finally go back to my hotel room. I hadn't been back since Michael and I had that little fight, and because of that, I was naturally a bit reluctant to return. Well, whatever, it wasn't like I was going to see him. I'd avoid him and go straight to my room. And I did just that. As soon as I got back to the inn, I took the lift to the 2nd floor and quickly made my way to my room. Phew, I let out a relieved sigh as I opened the door. Only to find a group of people inside. Lily and Michael were sitting across from each other on the couches. On the center table between them lay a large holographic satellite view map of the city. They were locked in an intense discussion. Alexia was lying on my bed again, kicking her feet in the air like a bored child. Today, she was folding a piece of paper, making something with it. It seemed she had picked up a new hobby, again. Ironically, the blind girl was the first to notice my presence. She turned her head in my general direction, and her face lit up with a smile. "Oh, Lord Samael, you're back," she exclaimed. "I was starting to get bored without you." Because of that, Michael and Lily also turned their attention to me. Just as I thought, the black-haired protagonist wasn't pleased to see me. "Oh, look, Lily. Guess who decided to grace us mortals with his presence again?" Michael snarled. Lily looked like she had been dealing with his temper for a while. She sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose, as if warding off an incoming headache. "Michael, please. No, let me have this," Michael interrupted and turned to me. "Must have been nice, huh? Running off to do whatever important thing you deemed necessary while we've been here actually working on the mission." I leaned casually against the doorframe, folding my arms as I gave him a bored look. Good to see you too, Michael. And yes, it was nice. Thanks for asking. His scowl deepened, and I could practically see steam coming out of his ears. But before he could launch into another tirade, Lily interjected with a firm voice. Enough. Both of you. She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. Where have you been, Sam? We've been trying to finalize our plan, and we need you to be part of it. I gave her a brief look before ignoring her and shifting my attention to the blind ginger. Why are you all in my room? But Alexia's focus stayed fixed on the piece of paper she had been working on. Then, I realized she couldn't see me looking at her. So I called her out. Alexia, I'm asking you. Her ears perked up. Oh, well, you see, your room is the biggest of all our rooms. So, we hold strategy meetings here. Where were you? Michael's shout snapped my attention back to him. I took a measured breath and shrugged. Believe it or not, I was also working on the mission. I told you how the church is involved in something shady the last time we met. I'm investigating it. Michael frustratedly rolled his eyes. Again with that, do you have any proof? I pretended to look stumped. Ah, well, not yet. But, Michael cut me off. Damn it, Samael, you're chasing ghosts. I'm not. I shot back. I don't have anything concrete, but I know the church is involved in all of this. I know it. Michael grunted in exasperation. Instead of arguing, he picked up a paper from the center table and walked up to me. He shoved the paper in my face and yelled, "Look at this. This is the city's underground blueprints of sewer lines. The Overlord recently launched a project to expand the sewer system, claiming they were maintaining infrastructure. But in reality, they were digging tunnels to connect the whole city." Quote. These tunnels, Lily added. That's how they're deploying the spirit beasts to attack different parts of the city. No one sees it coming until it's too late. And after the attack is over, the spirit beasts can escape through those same tunnels. I checked it, Michael said, gritting his teeth. I have a card that grants me something similar to X-ray vision. I could see through objects, so I searched for these tunnels. And they indeed exist all under the city. And do you know where every single one of them leads back to? Of course, I knew. I was the one who forged all the documents Michael read to reach this conclusion, after all. And it was all true, but it wasn't the full truth. To the Overlord Mansion? I asked, feigning ignorance. Yes. Michael threw away the city's map of the sewer system. All those tunnels lead directly to the Overlord Mansion. There's something under his grand palace. He's behind all this, not the church. Michael, do you really think the Overlord alone had all the resources and power to pull something like this off without anyone noticing? I said. Before he could speak again, I continued. There's another man involved here, someone with almost as much influence as the Overlord himself, the High Priest. Do you really think he wouldn't have noticed what's happening right under his nose? Michael made a ridiculing face. Oh my God, you're just throwing out baseless accusations now. Why can't you accept that you're wrong for once? Because I'm not, I retorted. Michael was about to launch into another screaming session, but Lily stepped in. Look, whatever the case may be, we're raiding the Overlord Mansion tonight, she said. I frowned. What? Without a search warrant? That's illegal. A search warrant won't be issued in such a short time, she argued back. Many people will die if we don't hurry. Besides, once we find proof that the Overlord is indeed responsible for all this, we won't have to worry about breaking the law then. But we need your powers. So, help us, Sam. Please. First, don't call me that, I shook my head. Second, have you all gone insane? You're talking about breaking the law. What if you don't find any solid proof? What if it's just a trap you're walking into? I won't break the law for that. Are you serious? Michael yelled back. Of everyone here, you have a problem with breaking the law. Who the fuck are you fooling? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a deep breath and shook my head again. I don't care what you think. I won't do it. Besides, I still believe you're not seeing the full picture here. The church is still on my radar, so I'll keep investigating that. With that, I turned around and started walking out of the room. Wait, Sam, Lily tried to call after me, but Michael stopped her. No, leave him, Lily. He said, glaring at my back as I walked away. We're better off without him anyway. 106. I hate him. I hate him. Michael seethed through clenched teeth. His face was red, and bulging veins popped on his forehead. It seemed as if he got just a bit more angry, his head might explode. Lily continued to comfort him by gently patting him on the back. Usually, she was the first to defend Samael whenever Michael vented his frustrations toward the youngest Theosbane. But today, even she found herself at a loss for words. After all, Samael had indeed done the very thing Michael accused him of before. He had left his team in a dire situation when they needed him most. He refused to support them. He didn't have their backs. Trust had to be built. It was transactional. You couldn't simply expect to receive trust from people without first giving it yourself. By refusing to cooperate and help them today, Samael had shattered any foundation on which a bond of trust between them could have been built upon, at least for the foreseeable future. It was only natural that they were upset with him now. And sure, Lily was aware of how hypocritical it was for her to talk about trust, but this situation was different. It was critical. They were responsible for the lives of many. If they failed today, countless people would be at risk from whatever the Overlord was planning. Even if Samael didn't want to work with them, how could he ignore the danger he was placing so many people in? That was just selfish, Michael exclaimed. That's just selfish. He is so selfish. Why can't he just accept that he's wrong and help us? How self-absorbed can someone be? For someone who claims to hate him, you sure do talk about him a lot, Alexia chimed in while sipping from a packet of orange juice with a straw. Michael shot her a glare. His look was sharp enough to drill a hole in a stone. But Alexia didn't even flinch. She gave no reaction at all. After a moment, she smiled cheekily. Remember, I'm blind, so if you're glaring at me, it won't work since I can't see you. Michael gritted his teeth and looked away. I wasn't glaring. It was already afternoon. Michael, Lily, and Alexia were sitting in a quiet cafe at the town square. They were finalizing their plan to raid the Overlord mansion and uncover whatever dark secret he was trying to hide. Anyway, there's a clear problem with our not-so-brilliant plan. Alexia said, tapping her chin thoughtfully. Overlord Everin is at least a high-level B-rank awakened. Can we really defeat him? That was indeed a good question. I mean, she continued, pointing at herself first, then at Michael. I'm strong. You're not as strong as I am, but you're fine too. My shadow, Kong, while reckless, can also hold his own. Then she turned to Lily. And while you, Sugar, aren't a fighter, you're a seer. Did you just call me Sugar? Lily's face flushed, but Alexia didn't stop speaking. All in all, our team is ridiculously strong on paper. We should be able to take on a B-rank awakened. Yes, it will be difficult but not impossible. However, we won't just be dealing with him. If we're right, and Lord Everin indeed has an army of abominations in his mansion, then we'll have to fight those spirit beasts as well. Michael pondered this for a moment. He knew Alexia was right. He had also considered the same problem. They were strong. Even without Samael, their team was probably the strongest among all the other squads in their batch. But were they strong enough to break into the Overlord mansion, fight his security, take him on, and battle abominable monsters at the same time? No, it seemed like a tall order, perhaps even an impossible one. Sure, Michael still had an ace up his sleeve that he could use if things got out of hand, but that was a last resort. He didn't want to reveal his true power just yet. After thinking it over, he glanced up. What do you suggest? Alexia shrugged. If Samael was here, I'd have suggested splitting into two groups. One group could create a diversion while the other sneaks into the enemy territory unnoticed, gathers evidence, and everyone gets out safely. She sighed. But since young Lord Theosbane is not here with us, we can't afford to spread our forces thin. So, our only option is to charge in head-on, gather the proof, and as I said, get the fuck out of there. Wait, Michael shook his head, are you suggesting that we give up on apprehending the Overlord? Yes, Alexia replied bluntly, leaning back in her chair. Apprehending him is a pipe dream. The Overlord is strong. On top of it, he's surrounded by vile abominations and fortified security. What do you think happens if we try to take him down on our own? Spoiler alert, we end up dead. Michael's jaw tightened, but we can't just let him go. By the time the Academy gets involved, it could be too late. He might vanish, or worse, carry out more attacks, kill more innocents. This isn't just about gathering proof. It's about justice. Alexia raised an eyebrow. And how are you planning to serve justice if you're a corpse? Lily stepped in before the argument could escalate. Michael, she's right. As much as I hate to admit it, we need to focus on what's realistically achievable. If we get evidence and get out alive, the Academy will have everything they need to intervene in this matter. They have battalions to handle this sort of thing. Michael glanced between the two of them. His frustration was evident. The idea of walking away, leaving a monster like Overlord Everin free to continue his atrocities, made him sick to his stomach. But deep down, he knew they were right. Their job wasn't to play heroes, it was to expose the truth. Fine, he said after a long pause. We focus on the evidence. But if there's even the slightest chance to take him down, I'm taking it. Risk or not, Alexia smirked. Sure, just don't complain when your noble ideals get us all killed. Michael ignored the jab and exhaled. All right, let's finalize the plan. We'll need to infiltrate the mansion, locate whatever he's hiding, and have a way out. He let the silence stretch for a moment, then tilted his head toward Alexia. So, where's our scout? Scouting, she replied, her tone flat. He's finding ways in and out of the mansion. Still, Michael raised an eyebrow. He's been at it for 2 days, and we haven't heard a word from him. You think he's okay? Alexia waved a hand dismissively. He's fine. Kong might not look like much, but stuff like scouting, infiltrating, and espionage is his specialty. He'll contact us when he's ready. Michael frowned. I'm not doubting his skills, but we're running out of time. Before Everin realizes we're onto him, we need to act. I want to make a move tonight. Alexia rolled her sightless eyes in mock exasperation. Oh, Mikey, always stressing so much. I told you, Kong will come through. Relax. Michael was going to respond when the cafe door creaked open and rang the small bell hanging over it. A tall young man walked inside. His hair was so white it seemed spun from clouds, and his eyes were azure blue like the clear sky on a summer morning. He had an athletic frame, and while he was undeniably handsome, his face carried a feral edge that gave him a wild appeal. Kong Tae Jin looked around the room, spotting them in an instant. He walked over and stopped at their table before addressing Alexia. Young mistress, he greeted, inclining his head. Apologies for not contacting you. The Overlord has network jammers installed all around his mansion. No worries, Alexia shook her head. She then grinned at Michael. See, I said he'll come through. Michael sighed and turned to Kong. So, did you find a way in? Kong scoffed before replying curtly, of course. Michael blinked. He couldn't help but notice the difference in how Kong spoke to Alexia compared to everyone else. With her, he acted like a docile puppy, waiting to roll over at her command. But with anyone else, he was like a rabid wolf, ready to tear someone's throat out at the slightest provocation. Michael knew shadows were fiercely loyal to their masters. They were conditioned since childhood to serve a single person. It was all they knew. But even for a shadow, Kang's devotion to Alexia seemed a little, too much. Or maybe it was normal. What did Michael know? He didn't have a shadow, and he hadn't seen many others. Only scions of ducal clans or those descending from the royal blood could have a shadow in their service. And Michael didn't exactly know too many highborn brats. Well, except for Samael. But his shadow was different. Juliana was aloof, not servile. Maybe that was because she came from a noble family. And nobles, after all, were known to be quite arrogant. Whatever. He was getting sidetracked. Shaking his head, Michael put a stop to his chain of thought and looked back at Kong. Alright, then, let's get moving. They needed to know everything Kong had learned, escape routes, patrols, anything useful. The cafe they were in wasn't crowded. In fact, there were barely any customers here. But even so, they couldn't afford to discuss the sensitive details of their plan in a public space. They needed to get back to their hotel. But just as Michael was about to stand, Kong spoke up. Wait, Michael frowned. What? I haven't eaten in 2 days, Kong said, glancing down at the untouched burger on the plate in front of Michael. Michael blinked. You want my burger? Kang's gaze didn't waver. Yes. Alexia's lips curved into a sly smirk. Mikey, be a dear and feed the starving scout. With a resigned sigh, Michael slid the plate across the table. Here, enjoy. Alexia's smirk broadened, her gray eyes sparkling with amusement. Oh, and don't be shy, Kong. Order whatever you want. Mikey's paying for a job well done. Michael's eyes shot wide in shock. He opened his mouth to protest, but by the time he could form a word, Kong had already ordered half the items on the menu and added them to his tab. Find your next read on my virtual library empire. 107. The high priest was standing before the congregation, bathed in the soft glow of the church's lights. It was evening already. The grand doors of the cathedral had been left wide open. Hundreds of people had gathered in the courtyard, spilling into the streets. Everyone had their eyes fixed on the high priest with a desperate kind of reverence. It was Sunday today, and at the end of each week, The high priest would recite the words of the goddess, spread her teachings, and guide the worshippers. To listen to his speech, to just steal a glance at him up close, countless people would gather in the church each weekend. To say that the high priest Bowden was a respected man in the community would be an understatement. In the eyes of the followers of Mother of Mercy, he was a prophet. Whatever he said was absolute. So, today was that day of the week. And while the high priest had been busy the last few weeks, he still made a little time for his speech today. Bowden raised his hands. He was a tall man with a potbelly and a bald head. Draped in shiny golden robes and with a silver cross hanging around his neck, he looked every bit the Messiah people claimed him to be. Sure, he didn't seem very dangerous at first glance, yet every ounce of his being radiated a commanding presence that was impossible to ignore. Standing on a raised dais, he leaned closer to the microphone stand and started speaking. His voice held a comfortable timbre, but also an undeniable authority. My brothers, my sisters, look upon this world, and tell me, do you see salvation? A hush fell over the crowd. The faithful hung on to his words, breathing in the rhythm of his speech like it was the air they needed to live. For years, we were promised protectors. For years, they told us the monarchs were gods in flesh, shepherds who would guide us to peace, to prosperity. And yet, he let the words linger, let the silence stretch just enough. And yet, the wars do not cease. The suffering does not end. He pointed to a man in the crowd, a shop owner dressed in old clothes, have you seen your business flourish under their rule? The man flinched, shaking his head. High Priest Bowden turned, his gaze sweeping over the sea of faces gathered before him. And you, he motioned toward an older woman, her hands worn and calloused. Has your labor lessened? Has your burden grown lighter? She shook her head, too. He exhaled, deeply, almost sorrowfully. No, my children, the monarchs are not shepherds. They do not tend to their flock. They do not know the weight of our prayers, the ache of our hunger. And why should they? He spread his arms wide, his golden robes catching the light. They are not of us. They are not with us. The crowd stirred. Some nodded, others clenched their fists. And yet, we have endured. We have survived, not because of our rulers or the government, but because of each other. Because of our faith. Because our goddess watches over us, not from high thrones and gilded palaces, but from within. In our hands, in our hearts, in the warmth we share with one another when the cold of this world would see us broken. A murmur ran through the assembly, rippling outward like a tide. Bowden smiled. So tell me, my children, who will you trust when the storm comes? The hands that have never touched the dirt, or the ones beside you, scarred as your own? The crowd's murmuring grew, and it was then that a figure approached the high priest. It was a lean man. His face was hidden beneath the hood of his golden cloak. Bowden noticed the man appear beside him but did not falter. Not yet. Instead, he let the weight of his words settle, then brought his hands together. We shall pray. As the congregation bowed their heads, the hooded man stepped closer to Bowden and started whispering in his ear. High priest, there is trouble, he said. Bowden did not react. Not outwardly, at least. He turned back to his people and lifted his hands once more. The goddess watches over us. Be strong, my children. Be vigilant. With that, he turned around and headed inside the church. The hooded man followed close behind. This man was Bowden's most trusted informant. His second in command. His right hand. What's the matter? Bowden asked. The man hesitated. Well, for starters, we suspect that sensitive data regarding your dealings with Overlord Everin has been stolen. Invoices, records of fund transfers from your account, illegal land ownership contracts, almost everything. Bowden froze in his tracks. He tried to keep himself composed, but a bit of panic still seeped into his voice when he spoke again. Quote. How? Are you certain? The hooded man nodded grimly. We're certain. The thief has been sending blackmail messages to your personal contact number. He claims Overlord Everin put him up to this. His demand is simple. Pay him 3 times what the Overlord offered, or he'll sell the data to either Everin or the Apex Academy cadets currently in the city. Bowden's eyes widened. What? No. Everin isn't foolish enough to sabotage our plan now, not when we're so close to completion. The informant hesitated. Your Eminence, we've verified that the data in his possession is authentic. What we don't yet know is how he stole it, how he bypassed the wards, or how he even got inside your chambers. But one thing is clear, the data he has is real. Bowden exhaled slowly and pressed his fingers against his temple. His mind began racing through possibilities. Somebody had infiltrated the church. Not just that, they had broken into his private chambers. The security wards weren't something an ordinary thief could slip past, and only a select few had the access key required to enter his quarters. This could be an inside job. Damn it, Bowden cursed under his breath. A thief, a blackmailer, some nobody had invaded his sanctum, had sifted through his personal dealings, had the audacity to make demands of him. Unacceptable. His jaw clenched. Why would Everin do this? Why betray us now, when we stand on the cusp of victory? The informant's voice dropped. Maybe he's setting you up to take the fall when this is all over. Maybe he wants to pin all the blame on you so he could get rid of you. Bowden's fists tightened. Of course. The church and Ishtara's government had been at odds since the civil war ended around a decade ago. It was inevitable. Everin and Bowden were the two most powerful men in the region. And their philosophies could not have been more different. Neither trusted the other. Now, it seemed, Everin had finally decided to remove the church from Kandera once and for all. In a few days, they were going to unleash hordes of spirit beasts upon the city. If Everin had all the evidence of their dealings, he could simply alter the documents to frame Bowden as the sole mastermind behind all the destruction. Discover hidden content at my virtual library empire. The citizens would turn on the church. And Everin would finally be able to rule the region unchallenged. It was a classic betrayal. Bowden lowered his hand and tried to keep his voice even. And you're telling me this now? The hooded man swallowed. We only confirmed it an hour ago. We wanted to be thorough before bringing it to you. Bowden took a slow step forward. Thorough, he repeated. Then tell me, what else have your thorough investigations uncovered? Who is this thief? The informant hesitated. We don't have a name. We managed to catch his face on one of the security cameras, but that's all. Bowden's expression darkened. The hooded man pressed on. We're still trying to track him down. But Your Eminence, the immediate threat is not Everin. If the thief intended to sell him the data, he would have already done so. The fact that he's asking us for more money means he'll sell to whoever offers the highest price, Bowden finished coldly. The informant nodded. Exactly. Which means our real concern is keeping that data out of the hands of the Academy cadets. Because they should have more funds to spare than either you or the Overlord. Silence descended over the room they were in, and a flicker of raw fury flashed across Bowden's eyes before he forced himself to calm down. I should have dealt with them the moment they arrived, he muttered. The cadets, Apex Academy's meddlesome brats. Bowden had never met them in person, but he had kept loose tabs on them since their arrival. And as expected, the cadets had been a thorn in his side the moment they arrived in this region. They asked too many questions. Probed where they didn't belong. And now, this. Bowden had left them alone at first. Since all of them were merely first years, he thought how much trouble could a handful of children possibly cause. But he had been wrong. He should have had them killed the day they arrived. Bowden turned and walked toward the candlelit altar at the far end of the room. He stopped before the towering statue of the Mother of Mercy, gazing up at her. Fortify our security, he ordered. If that thief sells the data to the cadets, they'll make their move soon. We must be prepared. It was a shame. He had no love for Overlord Everin. In fact, he despised the man. But their partnership had been convenient, mutually beneficial. And now, it seemed, Everin had let a viper loose in his home. What's the plan, Your Eminence? The informant asked. Bowden turned around, the flickering candlelight casting deep shadows across his face. We will reverse this on Everin, he said. We'll make it seem as if the government was responsible for all the attacks. How? The informant asked. We'll also alter evidence, Bowden replied. Forged documents, falsified records, witnesses who will swear that Everin orchestrated everything. The informant nodded slowly. And what about the cadets? Let them come. Bowden's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. They will die here. And the thief? The informant questioned. Try to strike a false deal with him. Hold him off from selling that as long as possible, the high priest replied. In the meantime, begin preparations to launch the phase 2 of our plan. This soon, the hooded man expressed his concern. Weren't we supposed to wait a few more days? It's too risky to wait any longer. Bowden shook his head. We'll carry on with our plan as soon as we're ready, before anyone has the time to question the truth. The informant hesitated only for a moment before nodding. Understood, Your Eminence. I'll begin the preparations. Bowden turned back to the statue of the Mother of Mercy. The city will soon drown in chaos. We'll use that time to make our move, he murmured. And when the dust settles, the people will beg for salvation. We will be there to offer it. He clasped his hands together in prayer, but his mind was already on the war to come. 108. The evening was about to end. It was almost night. In the fading glow of the setting sun, Michael and his group were patrolling the general area around the Overlord mansion. They stayed just far enough from the estate to not seem suspicious, yet close enough to take note of every external detail. The Overlord mansion was in the heart of the town square, a part of the city where only the rich and influential could afford to live. Lord Everon's estate was a modern mansion constructed from sleek glass and reflective white stone that shimmered beautifully in the sunset's light. The entry gates were tall and wrought iron, their sharp tips tapering into vicious spikes. These imposing black gates were guarded by 2 sentinels with weapons in hand. But that wasn't the most daunting part. After all, tall walls could be scaled, locked gates could be picked, and guards could be subdued. So, what was the real issue? According to Kong, the mansion's walls were inscribed with a continuous string of runes that encircled the entire estate. That ring of runes was called a ward. It was a form of artificery, a kind of magic. Not the fairy tale kind of magic, but the scientific kind. Michael knew little to nothing about artificery, so he had no idea how those runes were inscribed or how they functioned. But he did know one thing. Crossing that ward without authorization was impossible unless you were an S-rank awakened or higher. Anyone else would be paralyzed the moment they tried to step over the circle of runes. So, sneaking into the mansion was out of the question. But that wasn't the only problem. The Overlord mansion was equipped with a state-of-the-art security system. Heavy-duty automated turrets were stationed on the mansion's terrace, positioned to rain down fire from above on any intruder. These turrets were wirelessly linked to countless security cameras that monitored every inch of the mansion's surroundings. The moment someone dangerous came too close, the turrets would open fire. All in all, breaking in was going to be no small feat. This is going to be very difficult, Michael sighed. He was biting his nails, looking overly worried. Relax, Alexia rolled her eyes. Just stick to the plan and it'll be fine. Probably. Or we'll all die horribly. No big deal. Exciting, isn't it? Michael shot her a deadpan look. You're not very good at pep talks, are you? Alexia giggled. The 2 of them were sitting across the street on a roadside bench under the shade of the overhanging branches of a tree. Kong was inside a restaurant a few blocks down, blending in with the evening crowd. Lily was standing, farther away, leaning against another tree on the sidewalk, casually scrolling through her phone. The road outside the mansion was sparsely crowded, with pedestrians going about their day. All of them were wearing earpieces to stay in contact through a private radio channel. Michael exhaled, brushing a hand through his hair. All right, let's go over our plan one more time. We can't afford any mistakes. Kang's voice echoed in his ear. The plan is simple. We break in, get the evidence we need to put the Overlord behind bars, and get out. Yeah, Michael replied sarcastically. What do we do about the fucking turrets? This time, Kong sounded slightly irritated. Those turrets are automated. They're linked to the security cameras. And what do we do about that? Michael pressed, though he already knew the answer by now. After all, they'd gone over this plan a dozen times already. Still, Kong replied, look to your left. There's an electricity pole there. We're going to cut the power lines connected to it. That'll cause a blackout in the area. Sure, the Overlord has a backup generator in his mansion, but the sudden outage will trip the cameras. We should have about 5 minutes to make our move before they reset and the turrets activate. And after that, Michael pushed him to continue. Like I told you, the walls are covered in runes. We can't just climb over them. The ward will paralyze us, Kong explained. So, we'll have to bulldoze through. Break the walls. Shatter them. That should disrupt the runic circle and disable the ward. You're absolutely sure it'll work? Michael couldn't help but voice his concern. Because I really don't want to get paralyzed the second we step in. Don't worry, it will. But we'll need to blow a huge chunk out of the walls, Kong clarified. It's going to take a lot of firepower. Don't worry about it, Alexia chipped in. I've got just the card for this job. Or should I say, cards. You're as brilliant as ever, mistress, Kong praised, his tone genuinely admiring. Anyway, after that, it's just a matter of dealing with the guards and whatever else the Overlord has waiting inside. It was a solid plan. And it was all Kang's idea. Michael had to admit, he was impressed by how quickly Kong had pieced together a solution to every obstacle. He really was good at his job, no doubt about it. As soon as night fell, the group got to work. Their plan was solid, but execution was everything. They couldn't afford a single misstep. First, Michael positioned himself under the electricity pole, ready to summon his weapon at a moment's notice. Next, Alexia took her place, manifesting a few cards in her hands. These were throwable cards that exploded upon impact like military-grade grenades. Meanwhile, Lily and Kong were walking from opposite ends of the street. Your next journey awaits at my virtual library empire. The moment they met in the middle, directly in front of the mansion's gates, the plan would be set in motion. The street was still somewhat busy, with pedestrians on the sidewalks and the occasional vehicle passing by. But Michael had decided they couldn't wait any longer. It was time to act. And act they did. The instant Lily and Kong met in front of the mansion's gates, everything unfolded in a blur. Michael raised his hand, and a longsword materialized in his grip from a swirling river of light particles. In one swift motion, he turned and swung the blade in a clean arc, slicing through the giant metallic pole behind him. Sparks erupted as the pole began to topple sideways. The power lines snapped, crackling violently before the entire block was plunged into darkness. By the time the pole fell to the ground with a thunderous clang, the streetlights had flickered out. Pedestrians screamed and scattered in panic. Simultaneously, Alexia flicked a handful of explosive cards through the air. Some struck the mansion's outer wall, while others landed just in front of it, detonating on impact with a series of deafening explosions. Stone and dust erupted into the air, leaving behind a gaping hole in the mansion's wall that was large enough for a truck to drive through. It was done. Their plan had worked. The security cameras were tripped, and the mansion's wall was now a crumbling breach. Everything happened so quickly that the guards stationed at the gates barely had a chance to react. By the time they understood what was happening, Kong and Lily had already drawn their weapons and charged forward to engage them. Michael took a sharp breath. His composure was steady despite the chaos. It was time for him to move. Instead of helping their squad mates, he and Alexia slipped through the breach in the wall and entered the mansion. Inside, they saw more security guards rushing toward the commotion outside. But all of them stopped as soon as they noticed him and Alexia. Intruders, one of the guards yelled, and all the others darted in their direction. However, they were far too slow. Before any of them could execute a proper attack, Alexia was already on them. With no intentions of holding back, she had already summoned her origin card. Her first victim could only blink in confusion as she ran forward and slammed her foot into his chest, sending him flying back until he collided with a few others and knocked them down as well like bowling pins. The rest of the guards used this chance to draw their pistols and rifles. Without warning, they opened fire. But Alexia didn't flinch. She had already anticipated this. So, she summoned a long Pavai's shield that was big enough to completely cover her. The bullets ricocheted harmlessly off the shield's surface, sparking against the reinforced metal. Although none of the bullets reached Alexia, the force behind the shots was so imposing that she was being pushed back. But she had expected that, as well. A few more throwable cards manifested in her hand. And she threw them all over the shield. But these ones didn't detonate. Instead, they exploded into flashes of bright light, utterly blinding and disorienting everyone present. The firing stopped momentarily, and Alexia used this chance to rush forward and slam her shield into a guy with the force of a speeding car. Michael didn't waste the opening, either. He dashed forward and whipped his longsword around. The first guard barely had time to react before Michael's blade sliced through his rifle, cleaving it clean in half. A brutal kick to the chest sent the man crumpling to the floor. The next guard lunged at him, swinging a combat knife. Michael sidestepped effortlessly and twisted his wrist to bring his sword up in a sharp arc. The blade cut shallowly across the attacker's torso. The man collapsed with a strangled gasp. He wouldn't die from that wound, but his next couple of days were going to be miserable. Alexia, meanwhile, was handling the remaining guards. She threw her shield at an incoming enemy and closed the distance between him and her. She then slammed an elbow into his throat before grabbing his collar and hurling him into another guard. Both hit the floor in a tangled heap. But the real challenge was only starting. 109. Michael had taken down several guards, either knocking them unconscious or leaving them too battered to continue fighting. Alexia had handled her fair share of enemies too. By now, the mansion's courtyard was covered with bodies. There were no casualties, yet. But, instead of thinning out, the number of guards kept increasing. More and more guards kept rushing out endlessly, swarming Alexia and Michael, not giving them even a second to breathe. What's worse was that the guards were gaining ground, pushing the duo back. Their attack formation was highly efficient. Dozens of them were using automatic rifles to unleash a hail of bullets from a distance. Others were trying to creep closer with pistols or enchanted artifacts, attempting to engage in close quarters with the intruders. Michael gritted his teeth. He was crouched behind an earthen barrier he'd conjured using one of his defensive cards. Alexia dismissed her Pavai's shield and re-summoned it into her grip, which she was now using to deflect the incoming storm of bullets. Both of them were unharmed but pinned. They were forced to be on the defensive. It was a bad situation. And it was about to turn dire. Above, on the terrace, the automated turrets flared to life. The moment they came online, they opened fire, and the bullets started raining down from the sky like rain. The brutal impact of the shots, combined with the need to shield herself against attacks from every angle, drove Alexia to one knee. Since Michael was not using a physical shield, he was holding up much better. But his earthen wall had fractured under the torrent of gunfire as well. Michael's earthen barrier was riddled with gaping holes. Large chunks of it kept crumbling away every time a bullet hit it. Yeah, it was a dire situation, no doubt. Alexia somehow scrambled her way over to Michael and ducked next to him. When she spoke, her tone was almost casual, as if they weren't in a life-or-death situation. "Hi, Mikey, what are you doing?" Michael gave her his usual deadpan glare. "Oh, you know, trying not to die. You, same, Alexia giggled. But a grunt escaped her lips a second later when a bullet grazed her shoulder. "What, are you shot?" Michael asked with genuine concern in his voice. "Nah," Alexia shook her head while wincing slightly. "Just a scratch. But seriously, why aren't these guys ending? We've taken down, like, 50 guards already, and they are still coming at us. How many of them are there? And how'd they react so fast? It's like they were expecting us." She was not wrong. The guards had mobilized way too quickly. They'd been ready with rifles, ammo, and a practiced formation. It indeed felt like they were expecting something like this to happen. But how? Michael's first thought was that maybe they hacked the radio channel he and his group were using to communicate earlier today. But that was impossible. That channel was encrypted. Unless someone had leaked the decryption key, no one should have been able to eavesdrop on their plans. Wait, could Samael have done it? Could he have betrayed them? Maybe he told the Overlord they were coming in. No. Michael immediately shook his head, putting aside that thought. That was a ridiculous accusation. Sure, that jerk had a grudge against him, but would Samael really sabotage the whole mission? He wouldn't risk Alexia and the others just to hurt Michael, right? That would be too low, even for him. Right, Alexia snapped him back to reality. "Mikey, I'm asking you something. Do you have an armor card?" Michael blinked at her. Her already high-pitched voice was nearly drowned out by the thunder of gunfire. It took him a second to register what she was saying. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, I do, but I didn't want to use it this early. Armor cards were a type of item card. Just like some cards could summon swords or spears, these ones materialized full-body armor onto their user's body. But most lower-ranked Awakened avoided these types of cards. Why? One simple reason. It took way too much essence to maintain a full suit of proper armor. Every joint, every plate, every inch that covered the body drained up essence. In fact, most full-body armors drained more essence than high-tier spell cards. So, a shield or barrier card was far more efficient. That's why low-level Awakened rarely kept armor cards in their soul arsenal. Some people opted for lighter gear like a chainmail or a breastplate, but most fought unprotected, unless they were brawlers, who needed the bulk for close combat. Of course, there were anomalies who didn't need armor at all. Like Samael. He could create shields or reshape terrain using his innate power just by touching the ground. He doesn't need to carry a card that could grant him protection. Samael. Michael's mood soured just by thinking about him. If that insufferable golden-haired brat were here, he could have raised walls or barriers to shield them from the gunfire. Then this situation could have been so much less dangerous. Different abilities are useful to fight against different threats. Michael knew he and Alexia were stronger than him in a direct confrontation, but right now, Samael's power would have been useful. Michael sighed, forcing himself to focus. Alexia misread his frustration and shrugged. "Look, I didn't want to burn my essence this soon either, but we're stuck here." "Yeah," Michael agreed. "Besides, they're about to bring out the heavy artillery. We'll need to armor up soon anyway." "What?" Alexia stared at him, baffled. "Oh, right, you can't see." Michael clasped his hands, then peered through a bullet-riddled gap in the barrier. "Some guys at the back are loading bazookas." Alexia froze. Then she shrieked, "Excuse me. Why the hell do they have those kinds of weapons on them?" Michael shrugged. Who knows? But let's hurry up. A deafening explosion cut him off as a rocket slammed into the ground nearby, hurling debris into the air. Before he could react, another projectile struck his earthen barrier and exploded. The wall shattered into dust almost immediately. A third rocket hit Alexia's shield and detonated. The booming impact knocked her backward. Thundering explosions erupted like fireworks. The earth shook as more rockets continued to rain down on them or in their general direction, blasting craters into the courtyard. Guards who'd been lying unconscious weren't spared. Some were caught in direct blasts, their bodies reduced to little more than a scattering of burnt flesh and shattered bones. Some weren't lucky enough to die instantly. A few guards were thrown back by the explosions. They crumpled to the ground like broken dolls. A few others were lying in the dirt with their limbs bent unnaturally. Some were struck by shrapnels, blood pooling beneath them. Others simply vanished in the firestorm, burnt to ash. The courtyard was filled with screams and cries and dust and debris. When the firing stopped and the smoke somewhat cleared, the air reeked of scorched earth, blood, and gunpowder. Those who were wounded groaned weakly, but most were silenced by death. The courtyard was now a smoldering ruin. It was a scene of hell. One of the guards who'd fired the bazookas shook, then fell to his knees. He was young, barely past his teens. And his face was pale as he gasped for air like a fish out of water. Read new chapters at my virtual library empire. Hey, get your shit together, Rowan. Barked the man beside him, an older guard whose rank insignia glinted harshly on his uniform. But the young man, Rowan, didn't move. His wide eyes kept staring at the carnage ahead. Smoldering craters, severed limbs, and the charred remains of men he'd shared meals with. Men he'd joked with during drills. A massacre. This was a massacre. The people who died were killed by their own comrades. Rowan, the older man gripped his shoulder, shaking him. This ain't your fault. Orders are orders. The overlord will pin the blame on them, we're just following procedure. Procedure. The word curdled in Rowan's throat. Procedure couldn't justify killing their own friends. It couldn't unburn the faces he recognized in the ash. He didn't answer. His chest hitched violently, breaths coming in ragged, shallow bursts. The older guard glanced around. It wasn't just Rowan, others were trembling too. Their hands were slack on rifles, faces slick with sweat and guilt. None of them had signed up for this. Hell, half of them were hired for crowd control, not this. The older man sighed. He himself was feeling sick to his stomach. But orders were orders. This was his job, the only one he'd ever been good at. A shaky voice spoke up from his left. At least we got them, right? Those Apex Academy cadets. The older guard turned to the man who said that. You idiot. What? The man flinched, bewildered. How long have you been in this line of work, huh? You should know to never jinx shit like that. But before he could berate him further, he noticed something flickering in the drifting smoke ahead. Fuck, he hissed. And immediately, a figure clad in lustreless black armor emerged from the haze. 110. Fortunately, before the first rocket exploded in his face, Michael had already donned a matte black suit of heavy armor. It protected him from the worst of the impact. The armor was nothing special. It was made of mystical steel, but like all awakened items, it was exceptionally durable. Most mundane weapons couldn't pierce it, and so, he was left mostly unscathed by the explosions. Since he kept the visor of his helmet down, his peripheral vision was slightly blocked. Other than that, and his rapidly draining essence pool, he had no major issues. As soon as the explosion ceased, he darted forward through the settling dust. The guards didn't even notice him until it was too late. Closing in on the nearest enemy, he used the flat side of his longsword to swat at the man's head, knocking him cold. Without missing a beat, he thrust his leg into the chest of another who charged him, flinging the man backward like a paper doll. One guard tried to shoot him in the head at point-blank range, but the bullet simply ricocheted off, not even leaving a dent. Michael reached out, grabbed the rifle, and exerted enough strength in his grip to bend the barrel inward before headbutting his shooter, rendering him unconscious. Meanwhile, Alexia joined the fray. She was clad in a full set of armor that gleamed like polished copper under the moonlight, a look truly befitting her noble status. Her gauntlets were spiked, a long brown cape draped over her shoulders, and white plumes adorned the top of her Corinthian-style helmet. A guard rushed at her with an enchanted dagger. Without hesitation, she sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and delivered a sharp chop to the back of his neck. As he fell unconscious, she caught the falling dagger, spun around, and plunged the short blade into the shoulder of another guard who dared to sneak up on her. In the next moment, he was casually tossed aside like he weighed nothing by a girl much shorter than him. But Alexia didn't stop there. Discover hidden tales at my virtual library empire. In one single motion, she spun around and slammed her heel into the chin of another guard who had gotten too close. Without wasting a second, she moved on to target a group of guards who were reloading their bazookas. As that was happening, Kong leapt over the gates and landed in the courtyard, while Lily entered through the breach as the two of them finally decided to join the fight. Kong was already partially transformed. His nails had elongated into sharp claws, his canines had grown, and his eyes were glowing red in the dark. Lily, on the other hand, moved with the precision of someone who could see the future. She was always exactly where she needed to be to avoid being shot and had knocked several foes unconscious using her bow staff in under a minute after joining the battle. And just like that, it was over soon. They had to put down around 50 more guards before the onslaught finally stopped. As the last of the guards fell, a heavy silence settled over the courtyard. The once pristine stone pavement was now cracked and full of bodies. Some were merely unconscious, but most of them were dead. Ironically, they had killed no one. The acrid scent of gunpowder still hung in the air, mixing with the metallic tang of blood. Michael let out a sharp breath and rolled his shoulders to shake off the lingering tension. There wasn't a single dent in his lustreless black armor, though his essence was now starting to run a little low. He turned his head slightly. "Everyone still breathing?" "More or less," Alexia replied. As her helmet dissolved into particles of light, her face was revealed while the rest of her body remained clad. Her orange hair, damp with sweat, clung to her forehead. She looked battered but unfazed. Kong cracked his knuckles, his claws slowly retracting as his transformation waned. His movements looked a little pained as he was shot in his right shoulder and left thigh. Michael frowned at him. "Will you be okay?" Kong gave him a slightly offended look and scoffed, "Of course." As if on cue, the bullet lodged in his shoulder fell out, and the wound it left behind began to fill up with flesh. Michael's eyes shot wide. "Wait, do you have a regenerative healing factor?" "Haha, yes, I do." Kong looked overly proud. Then he coughed awkwardly. But only on moonlit nights." "That's still amazing," Michael said while taking off his own helmet, genuinely impressed. "You really are like a werewolf. Don't mind if I copy your powers." "What? Hey." Kong tried protesting, but it was already too late as Michael deployed his origin card. "Why, you thief." Lily, still holding her bow staff, glanced around at the fallen enemies, completely ignoring the two boys. Looking at the corpses and burned remains of all those people, she felt sick. These guards were prepared, more than they should have been. Alexia grunted. "Yeah, no kidding. Something about this whole fight didn't sit right with any of them." The sheer number of guards, their immediate mobilization, and their willingness to fire heavy weaponry in their own courtyard, it all screamed of forewarning. "So, should we proceed?" Lily asked aloud. "There could be a trap for us." Alexia walked next to her and patted Lily on the back. "That's why you are here with us, sugar. Tell us if we're about to die in advance." "Hey, just because I can see a few seconds into the future doesn't mean I can always change it," Lily retorted. Alexia was about to say something, but Michael beat her to it. "Well, we don't have a choice. If the Overlord really is onto us, then it's more of a reason we can't walk away now. Because if we do, he'll find a way to escape." "For the first time, I'm also inclined to agree with you," Alexia nodded. "The fact that the Overlord threw this many guards at us and deployed heavy artillery weapons means that he's desperate. He's trying to stall us." "Stall us for what?" Lily scowled. Michael took a deep breath, then turned towards the mansion. The grand double doors of the entrance were slightly ajar. "Only one way like and out," he said. "Let's go." Michael pushed open the doors and stepped inside. Alexia followed closely behind, with Kong beside her, while Lily walked at the far back, exactly where she needed to be. After all, if there was a trap waiting, she'd be the first to see it coming. In situations like this, a seer's life was worth more than theirs. The entrance hall was silent. It was not the still and peaceful kind of silence, but the unnatural kind, like something was about to happen, and no one had any idea what. The mansion's interior was just as they remembered from their last visit when they officially met the Overlord. The floors were made of polished marble, and moonlight streamed in through tall windows. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors decorated the walls. There were also modern art pieces, luxury furniture, and other high-end touches that looked slightly out of place against the mansion's old-world elegance. A sleek glass coffee table sat in front of a vintage leather couch, and a wall-mounted smart display was installed between two classical oil paintings. A state-of-the-art security panel blinked red near the grand staircase. Its interface was seamlessly built into the carved wooden banister. In the far corner was a minibar full of expensive bottles arranged beside a digital temperature regulator. Further down the hall stood a massive grandfather clock beside a biometric scanner. The entire place was a fusion of old money and new power. But right now, it felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Fancy, Alexia muttered casually, her copper armor clinking as she walked. Stay sharp, Lily said, gripping her bow staff tightly. Any idea where we should be looking? Michael asked. Underground, Kong answered immediately. All the tunnels under the city lead back to the Overlord Mansion, so that's where we should search. Underground. Fair, Michael nodded. Basement. We need to find stairs or a hidden lift that could take us down. And it didn't take long. Behind a painting of the Everin family crest, they found a reinforced metal door. The door was locked, and a numeric keypad was mounted on the wall next to it. Alexia snorted. Subtle. Does anyone have the password for this thing? Michael was about to slam his armored fist into the keypad when Lily stopped him and quietly stepped forward. She placed her hand gently on the cool surface of the keypad and started staring at it intently. Alexia exchanged a confused glance with Michael before frowning. What exactly are you doing? Lily didn't take her eyes off the keypad. I'm looking at my future self trying to type in the right combination to unlock the door. Alexia blinked. Wait, so you're essentially doing trial and error, but in time? Lily nodded hesitantly. Yeah, something like that. Alexia raised an eyebrow. But can't you skip all that and just see the future where you get it right, instead of going through every possible combination? Lily clicked her tongue, clearly frustrated. That's not how it works. Now, let me focus. Okay, girl, chill, Alexia said, throwing her hands up dramatically and stepping back with a playful smirk. I'm not trying to rush you. Finally, after a few more seconds, Lily moved her fingers and typed in the number combination. The door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit staircase spiraling down. Once again, Michael took the lead and started descending the stairs, with the others following closely behind him. The descent felt endless. They kept walking, but there was no end to the stairs. With each step down, the air grew colder, and the walls smelled of damp stone and something metallic. Finally, the bottom floor came into view. It was a corridor lined with reinforced steel, and it seemed to be illuminated by ceiling lights. After reaching the foot of the stairs, Michael took a cautious step forward. This place was too quiet. He had expected more enemies or even the Overlord himself to attack them, but there was no one here, not even any traps. Were they wrong to suspect the Overlord? Just as Michael began to doubt himself, he stepped into the corridor and saw it. The corridor opened up to a vast underground lab. Yes, under the Overlord Mansion was a research laboratory.